Right, Katia, I will hand over to you.
Well, thanks, Jack. Thank you everyone for joining today. So I'm Katia Vione. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Psychology at the University of Birmingham. And today I'm going to talk about a project that I've been working with some colleagues over the past year, in which we developed an AI assistant to help us with teaching. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our team. So I am the Gen AI working group school lead. And together with one of my colleagues from the group, Dr. Dietmar Heinke, we developed this assistant. So when the group was formed and we were brainstorming ideas and things that we wanted to cover as a group, Dietmar brought this based on his background and his more technical expertise. He said that one of the things that he would be interested is to see if we could create an agent to support teaching. And we developed that idea a lot throughout some conversations. So we first brought this conversation to Lisa Colson, who was working in one of the working groups with AI projects in the university. And she was very kind and even offered some funding to support this project. And once we had an idea of what we were doing, we started approaching colleagues to see the possibility of testing it in some modules. And Dr. Dawn England was very kind and happy to pilot it in her modules. She is based in the School of Education, and she played an important role in terms of embedding it and designing the learning activities in which the assistant was used. And we were supported by a fantastic research assistant, Amy Crisp, and obviously all of that with the support as well of the IT innovation team that had developed a platform that allowed us to create an agent. So this is the team that has been working in this pilot. So first talk about the project aims overall, so what we have done so far, but the overall aim and things that kind of where we want to go with this. And then the rest of the talk is split in three parts. I'm going to talk about the technical side, bearing in mind that I myself am not a very technical person, but I felt this would be useful if anyone is thinking about setting up agents themselves and have no idea where to start. This should give a very good overview of what kind of technical knowledge, or at least what do you need to start to create an agent or an assistant. So I'll be using those two terms interchangeably. Then I'll talk about the strategic side. What were the things that we were considering at the planning stages that we thought would or would not work based on both the pedagogical side, but also the technical side as well. And then finally, I'll talk about the pilot that we have done with in one module and what we learned from there, how we did it, and a little bit of the preliminary findings in terms of the student experience. And hopefully I will not talk too much and I will leave enough time for us to have a chat. I would welcome any thoughts. So if you have experience using agents in higher education, I would love to talk about that. But also if you have any questions or even concerns, all of this for me is very valid to understand and shape the direction of this project. In terms of project aim, so we wanted to start with developing a student-friendly AI tool, a bespoke tool as well, embed it across modules and teach other people to use it. So when we approach the IT innovation teams and Lisa Colson, for instance, they mentioned that even though we had lots of projects working with AI in education at the university, we were the first who approached this from a learning and teaching perspective and not necessarily in the way that students would use and interact with it, and not as much as academics creating something to support their work on the side. So we wanted to, so part of the aim as well was to see if we could develop a framework and then others could adapt if this worked. Long term, we would like to integrate it better with the VLE and classroom settings and in wider education in general. We see that there is quite a lot of potential for the work that we're doing, but at the moment it is something that is on the side and is not very well integrated, which causes a little bit more work. So starting with the technical side, so these assistants or agents, they use a particular AI technique called retrieval augmented generation. Basically, what it does is to use the working functions, let's say, of a normal LLM with a particular external knowledge base. And in this way, the answers produced by this AI agent, they are context aware. So they are based on this external knowledge database. And it's good because it allows using it in a private data in a kind of walled garden environment. This is quite important if we are using teaching materials, assessment briefs, things that we don't want to be like in the open AI world. The LLM, so this agent, it is trained, and I use quotation marks because it's technically not the best term, on specific course materials that the way it works right now, it's uploaded manually. So it's not something that it could just, let's say, grab Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard materials automatically, although this might be a possibility in the future. It cannot search external databases or search the internet. This is optional. This is what we opted for our agent. But depending on the system that you're using, you could allow for it to search for external databases. We thought it would be best not to at this stage. And one of the most important things of setting up an agent is the system message, because it gives the specific instructions for the behavior of the agent. So this is the interface of the environment for creating assistance that was developed by the university's innovation team. So each one of these boxes is a different agent. And now I'm going to walk you through the interface of setting up an agent. As I said, I felt that explaining the technical side a little bit might help. So when we started these conversations about this project, I was really interested from the learning and teaching perspective, but my only understanding of AI was as a user. So I had no idea how we could potentially set up an agent, how complicated it would be. And it turns out that it's fairly straightforward in this particular interface. And I have now worked with other interfaces, and it's very similar. So whatever I explain here, if you are given a different platform to work, it would still be very similar. So when you're setting up the agent, obviously you start with some basic information, such as giving a name for the assistant and a description of what that assistant does. Then the most important thing that I will break down later is the system message. So this is the instructions about how the assistant should respond. And we recommend that add some key information and some specific rules and constraints in terms of what the agent can and cannot do. As you can see in this box, we put some key information about coursework as well, even though that information is also in the knowledge base that we upload. There is a starter message that you can also tailor to explain, like a friendly hi, who am I? That is something that you edit and create as well according to your needs. And in this particular platform, we are also able to choose which AI model is used to answer. So we have done our pilot using the GPT 4.0. But depending on the platform or how your university IT has set it up, you might not be able to choose the AI model. And then for our interface as well, there are some possibilities that you can turn on or off. So files search in chat is, do we want to allow students to upload files or not? Code and analysis in chat is, again, for students to do coding in the chat that for our purposes was not needed. And allow analysis, it's for us to be able to download the chats and the conversations that students have with the agent. For this particular project, we had ethics approval to analyze the data that students entered in the chat. But obviously, this is something that you would have to consider and get potentially students' consent to be able to do. But it was quite important for us in this initial stage to be able to look at those conversations. So I'll go through a little bit the system message aspects that need to be covered in the system message to make sure that the assistant behaves in the way that it should. So the tone and style, it is conversational. It is intended to look like a ChatGPT or a Claude chatbot. So we instruct the agent that the responses should be professional and academic, but with a conversational flow. In the introduction, when the agent is introducing itself, to provide an overview of the course, assignments, learning outcomes, to remind the students that that is module-based as well. It was very important to us, based on our GenAI policies, that the agent will not be able to write an essay or even a full paragraph to the student. So we do add the instructions about the GenAI policy. So that's in the system message. And we also upload the file of the university GenAI policy and academic integrity policy in the agent with the agents as well. Sorry, one thing that I forgot to cover here is that you have another tab with the files that you just upload all the files that you want to be the knowledge base for your agent. We also give specific instructions about how it should engage. So encourage student interactions by asking follow-up questions and questions that support critical thinking and analysis. And we added key information about assignments, and that is sometimes you might have to do this because there is a limit on the number of files that you can upload depending on your university settings. Or you might have that as well in the separate files that are uploaded, and some signposting as well. So here, any key signposting that you would usually have in a module, it's important that you add it here as well. So our intention was for this to work as a platform that students could find any information that they would find in Canvas, that is the VLE that we use, they would be able to also find in our agent. Initially, we thought at the bare minimum, if that reduces workload in terms of answering some frequent questions, we would already potentially class it as a win. But we also wanted to see the potential for this, for students to use it to clarify their learning and engage it a little bit more with the course materials. Another important note about the system message is that you could write it in simple plain text with some headings, but we also tested using structured markup, so XML tags. I will show later an example. There is a lot of debate whether you need to use XML tags or not, but we, in the end, we ended up changing the instructions to XML tags because we felt it would reduces the chances of it mixing certain rules and instructions that we gave in the system message. So it is a bit of a trade-off because writing an XML system message is slightly more complicated, but you can use AI. So we went to AI, said we are developing an agent with this purpose. This is our academic integrity policy, blah, blah. Can you draft an XML system message? And then we edit it from there. So this is kind of how it would look like instead of the screenshot that I showed you that was plain text. This one is using XML text. So as you can see, we will have headings like objectives, constraints, and certain rules and things like that. So it was way more, we cover way more than I'm showing here, but this is just to give you an idea. So you have to be very careful when you're doing it in this way. But again, AI is very good at helping setting up for this particular use. The materials that we uploaded, so everything that was in the VLE, we uploaded in our system. That included the lecture materials, essay marking criteria, the frequent asked questions from the previous year, lecture slides, seminar materials, well-being support, key contacts, assessment information, and instructions as well for the coursework. We had to do it all manually, save it into Word files, when the information was directly in the VLE, but when there were files that we could download from the VLE, that's what we've done. For the initial pilot, we didn't pay a whole lot of attention in terms of the formatting, but it's important, depending on the number of files or the size of the files that you have, maybe it's something that you should consider. So this is also why I wanted to talk a little bit about chunking. So when we upload a large document in a reg agent, it's not able to use that document as a single unit. So every time a user asks a question, or a student asks a question in this case, it will search for the most relevant chunk of information. If you don't do the chunking in your document, the agent will have done the chunking in some particular way. So if you have a limited number of files that you can upload, depending on the system that you use to create your agent, then you might need to upload larger files, and you might have to be more careful and mindful about the chunking. And when I talk about chunking, it's just formatting a Word file with like the heading 1, heading 2, and in the way that that hierarchy is clear, because each chunk will be a context where the answers of your agent will be based. So bear in mind that there are systems that you cannot upload as many files, and you have larger files, and you have to be a bit more, spend a little bit more time formatting. Again, if you have this capability to do in a private walled garden environment, you can upload materials, especially Claude is quite good to do in doing this. You can upload the materials and ask it to produce a document with optimized chunking for a reg model. That is another way of doing it as well. So once we set it up, we moved on to some internal testing. So we created an agent based on a third-year module that was quite a small module. And we started using it ourselves, the researchers, as we thought a student potentially will use. One of the main objectives of the internal testing was that we were trying to break it. We wanted to see if we could get the agent to break the academic integrity regulations. And what was great to see is that we could not break it. So we would ask in many different ways to write an essay. And then when we ask it to write an essay, it would always reply saying it was not able to write an essay due to the GenAI guidelines. So we, as I said, we had a separate file with the academic integrity guidelines for the university, plus the academic integrity guidelines for the particular coursework. And it would also return by saying, well, I can help you with an essay outline, for instance, but I cannot help you writing an essay. So that was good because the agent was saying, I cannot do this, but I can help you in this other way. Another example of question that we tested, can you create a revision resource for the take-home exam covering a summary of the course content? And then it gave a structured revision resource as well with like a summary and signposting to specific lecture materials as well. So that is another way that students could be using the agent as a revision resource. We anticipated that it could also be used to basic questions like the deadline, word count for assignments, and contacts. And this is why it's important to check your agent first, because depending on how, if you have this information in the system message, it's less likely to hallucinate. If you have it in multiple documents, at the very beginning, there is a risk that the agent will hallucinate a little bit. But once you use it a little bit more and you ask some more questions, then it gets better with accuracy. So it's spending a little bit of time initially asking the questions is very important, and then checking if the way that you have done the chunking or uploaded the files, if everything is clear and is going to be retrieved accurately. Also, we tested if it would be able to inform what kind of tasks students might have to complete before a lecture or explaining content. So on the right-hand side, you can see, can you explain what circadian rhythms are? And then it says, it explains, and then at the end, it asks, do you understand what I have written? Can you elaborate? So it asks some follow-up questions for the student to check their understanding, which we thought was quite good. And then if the student, let's say, I don't understand, it would go on and then it provided a breakdown of what it had just explained. So as you can see, it's quite a good way for students to not just get an explanation of module materials, but also the agent. You can embed in the agent behavior these questions that ask students to check if they actually understand what the agent is saying. So in terms of a summary of what is important to consider at the stage of developing and planning, so it takes around 10 to 15 hours to train the model. At least that's what it took us in this very first one. Probably if we were to create another one right now, it would take slightly less time. So the initial setup, I would say it's quite time consuming. You don't need to know a whole lot of technical elements about Gen AI. So my experience was as a person who uses AI a lot. And we had Dietmar, who knows a little bit more how LLM works and how the reg model works. So he kind of was the bridge between IT and psychology and pedagogy in terms of understanding if the agent is behaving in this particular way. I think this is because, and in a way that we could fine tune the system message. So it behaves like any LLM. So it is, let's say, a personalized chatbot. The content needs to be manually uploaded for most ways of setting up agents. It can be drip fed, so these 10-15 hours of setting up, let's say if you don't have all the module materials at the beginning, you can start with lectures 1 and 2, let's say, and upload it as you go. There are some implications if you do that, but I would say as the first time that's okay. It is susceptible to errors, and it's important to tell students that they still need to be checking information, because that's what happens with all AI, and checking institutional department permission. You might need that sort of permission where you work. And at least in our university, not all modules have the same GenAI guidelines. So it would also mean that for each agent, we have to make sure that in the system message and the documents, the GenAI guidelines are very clear and tailored for that specific module. So once we knew that we had an agent that could go to a module, we started to think, where do we want it to go? Initially, obviously, we thought, well, it's safest to test in one module that has a clear topic. We wanted it to be essay-based as well, and a small module. So initially, we thought a third-year BSc module would be ideal. Based on the amount of work that we realized was needed to set it up and keep an eye on the module, we were expecting that if we can find a module leader who says, I'm happy for you to test, and they don't need to necessarily get their hands involved on it because of the workload, in a way that we would monitor and do all that work, that would be sufficient for us. We avoided modules such as like research methods. So even though we set up the agents in a way that they wouldn't search the internet, and we were not sure, and in conversations with IT, we could not be absolutely sure that the agent wouldn't use its own knowledge base to answer certain questions. So we wanted to, at first, stay away from modules that maybe it would give even though like in research methods, we might be giving certain advice, or we might be explaining certain nuances to students that maybe the model wouldn't do in the same way. So we felt it was best not to risk it. And we have not yet tested in this kind of module to see if it would work. So where we ended up after this idea that we wanted a single module, we wanted as well third-year students, because we wanted experienced students that could be telling us as well, have that critical thinking to tell us where they think things were not working very well. It was quite a struggle to find a module within the time frame that we had, but then we ended up in the School of Education with a master's module. Because the master's modules that we had available in spring in psychology, we felt that it wouldn't work as well. And then Dawn was very happy to test in her module. It was a module about education policies, so it has a clear topic. It was a written coursework, and she was also very keen in designing the activities for students to use the agent throughout the module as well. So that was very helpful, and this is what we ended up doing. So we piloted there. We went to the first lecture and introduced the agent to students. So now we're moving on to the actual what have we done in this pilot. So we introduced at the very beginning of the model. We went there as a team, Dietmar, Amy, and I, and we explained that this was both a teaching tool that was available to them, but it was also a research project that they could opt in to participate alongside and help us understand and improve the model. So they could use it regardless of participating in the research. So we explained what the agent was, and we did a live demo during a lecture. And then we said, you can use freely to the module, you will have access at all times. But one possibility is that we could switch it off, let's say before an assignment, if we felt that because of the GenAI permissions for that module, that would not be appropriate. And then Dawn and the teaching team, they embedded in seminar activities that they would ask students to have a conversation, use the assistant for prepare either their topics to discuss or to summarize things for them. And then Dawn will send us weekly updates pretty much in terms of how it was used, if the students reported any issues, and then we could fix. We also monitored the chats to see how they were using, and we had to do some tweaks along the way. So as I mentioned previously, we changed the message from the plain text to the XML tags. And the other thing that we noticed that we don't know exactly why, and IT team also didn't know, but at some point the agent became slightly less conversational, so we don't know if it's something changed with the GPT model that we were using or not. And then we had to tweak the system message to get it more conversational again, especially having the follow-up questions and prompting for critical thinking. And I'm going to move on to some of our preliminary findings. So we did a survey at the beginning and at the end of the module where we did ask about students' patterns of AI use for their studies before they started the module and also afterwards. And we also had some other questions about attitudes towards AI and feelings of belonging, but we have not analyzed that data yet. And we also had some focus groups. So these focus groups, we split the classes in smaller groups, and we handed them different sets of questions. And then they went to a private space and then discussed it themselves. So it was not the very traditional focus group. And they recorded and sent and shared the recordings with us. I'm not a qualitative person, and I did use AI to help me at least extract the most common used words for these preliminary findings. So we are yet to analyze the focus group data in depth, but it was interesting to see the overall initial perceptions of our agent. So in terms of overall experience, students thought that it was helpful, useful, easy. And it was very interesting to see in this quote that students wish so this happened in the spring term, and a student said, oh, I wish we had this from the first term as well. It would have been more useful. That was for us quite a positive experience in the sense that they feel there is value in having a bespoke agent. This other quote, it's interesting because it compares with ChatGPT, and the student acknowledges that it is different from other tools. And I also find it interesting that it said that the student said, so that this AI tool knows exactly what the learning objectives of this module are. I don't know if this is because it's an education student that they were that they picked up the fact that the tool is aware of the learning objectives and the materials, and that was quite important for their learning. I don't know if a student from another discipline would have the same awareness necessarily, or at least the same explicit awareness. So it was quite interesting that for them, this seemed to be an important element. In terms of their perception of learning support, here again, we learned some lessons along the way. So one of the first lessons that we learned in the first few weeks is that we noticed that students were in this class there were lots of they were primarily international students, and we noticed that they were asking questions in their native language that we had not considered it at all before. And we did debate whether we wanted to limit the agent to only accept questions in English and things like that. And when we felt that it was best to let them use naturally as they felt more comfortable. And then later on, we would explore why, or even see if there was a need to change that. We did encourage them to use it in English, but it was not a requirement. And that was quite interesting. So they said things like, I often use AI tools before the class. Then when I go to the lecture, I will find it easier for me to understand. I think AI allows me to ask questions at any time, even at midnight. So I think it's very convenient, and I don't need to feel embarrassed. So it was clear that in terms of learning support, they were both interested in the fact that they had access to this 24/7, but also that they felt it gave them chatting with the agent before a lecture or even during for their learning. It helped them have a bit more confidence to ask questions later. So I think this is quite an encouraging and positive finding for us. In terms of engagement, and it does overlap a little bit with the other one, the questions that we asked about engagement, they were to explore how engaged they felt, not just with the module itself and their learning, but also with their peers and tutors overall. That was one concern, that if students have the agent, will they interact less with their peers and their tutors? But the prevalent answers in engagement so far, it does look like they're talking more about their cognitive engagement with the module. So and that was quite interesting as well. So in this first quote, for instance, the AI let me follow curiosity side paths that I might have ignored before. For example, when I covered a theory, I could ask the tool to explain its criticism or real-world applications, which led me to ask more targeted questions in class and even look up extra readings on my own. So I think that was quite good that by using the agent, the student felt more curious. They thought about more other ways of applying the theory and even looking up extra readings. And the same, the other quote is also very much about cognitive engagement. When I hit a confusing concept, I could ask the tool to break it down or connect it to real examples, which made the content feel more relevant and less overwhelming. And again, in a big class of these had about 120 students, we can understand why sometimes students, they will not raise their hand and answer questions or ask questions. So the fact that they felt that this helped them ask those questions that they didn't feel they would have asked in the lecture is positive as well, but then also gave them confidence to later have to go and ask those questions. Quality of responses was also another element. And here is where I want to caveat. So in this particular pilot, we were uploading the materials as the module was progressing. So it meant that at the beginning of the module, so in week 1, we only had week 1 materials and week 2. So we were uploading the weekly materials at the same time that the materials were being made available to students. And when you upload it in this particular way, that the model is getting the materials drip fed to it, it takes a little while for it to start to be able to retrieve that information, and the quality of the responses will get better as there are more materials, as the knowledge base for the model is expanded. So at the beginning, that's why we can see that students were reporting that it was generic or vague. And there were even instances of incorrect answers that we had to go and correct, because this being AI, there is always that risk. But as the module progressed and we were able to update the model with the module materials, it got better, and we got feedback like this, that I think the answers were mostly accurate and helpful, relevant, easy to understand. This second one was also very interesting to us. It forces you to keep thinking, because with other AI tools, it's like, what else do you want me to do? Here, it gives you the responsibility. This is also something that for us is quite encouraging to see. The module team, so as I said, they were sharing their reflections as we were going. At the beginning, they felt that the students, whenever in a seminar, the activity encouraged them to use AI, even though they would say use the agent that we have for the module, they noticed that students would still be using other chatbots like ChatGPT and DeepSeek. They also felt that potentially the postgraduate students, they would be more likely to use the tools that they are already using, whereas maybe if this was with an undergraduate cohort, we would be able to potentially model their behavior a bit more. I don't know, we have not tested this in an undergraduate module yet. And then we noticed that many students used it in their native language. Group activities, usually one person would be engaging with the agent and the others would just be around and participating in a discussion. And there was the engagement with the agent itself. It got higher as the module went on, because there was more materials for them to actually interact. So this is a consideration. If you're not able to upload all the materials beforehand, know that there might be limitations at the beginning. So in terms of lessons learned and areas for attention, if this is something that you're doing, I would say at the beginning, it's important to monitor and adjust the agent if you need. So for instance, if you notice that it's not giving follow-up questions for students to think more, you might have to tweak a little bit the instructions. We feel it's one of the best uses of the agent. Onboarding with students is important, so they can understand how to use the tool. You still need a clear route to tutor support. It's equally important that students feel that they are not losing that contact with the teaching team. It might be slightly less user-friendly than other chatbots. So even though the interface is very simple to use, there is a place to chat, and then the answers come in the same way. In our particular platform, access to previous chats was not that straightforward. For instance, the fact that we didn't allow students to upload files, well, also we could allow that, but we didn't for this pilot as well. So that this is something that students fed back that they wish was easier to do. It has minimal hallucinations. It was not completely free, but we were able to pick that up quite quickly and sort it out. And that's why, again, the continuous monitoring and that openness with students to also report the issues is very important. We identified it as a potential for support for international students in terms of gaining the confidence in their understanding to then go and ask the questions. You need to be mindful of copyrighted content. We consulted our legal team, and they advised that we did not upload any materials from the reading list there, that we would have to check one by one in terms of licensing agreements. So do check with your institution about whether you would be able to do those things, because it would potentially improve the model, but we didn't use it in this case. Enabling internet search is something that you could consider as well. We felt that it was not the moment. And be mindful of academic integrity and make sure that all the guidelines are embedded in the agent's behavior, and even the policies are uploaded if you have the ability in terms of number of files supported. Implications that we felt, especially at the beginning when we introduced this project to colleagues, we felt that it would be important for academics to feel that they had some control in the way that AI was being used by students. And I think there are quite diverse opinions about this. So some might be more worried about how students are using AI, some might be less worried, but this is a way that at least we know that the knowledge base that students are using is the same thing that we are teaching them. So I think for many uses in teaching and learning, this is quite important. So it is course content specific. It will be compliant to academic integrity. It will support AI literacy skills. So there is now that situation that some academics might feel less comfortable in terms of teaching AI or even adopting AI for many, many reasons. But at the same time, we are all feeling that push to actually teach our students some literacy skills. So that is one of the ways of doing it. And this is more a question, but potentially even a speculation, but with some potential truth, that it might be more environmentally friendly. It's a concern that many people have when using these agents. And the fact that it is using a limited knowledge database is what allows me to assume that it is potentially a bit more or less problematic for the environment. In terms of next steps, we still have to analyze the data, as I said, from this pilot study. We are starting to look at other modules to implement, and we want to not just be in education or psychology, we will look into other disciplines. And we also want to increase the critical thinking focus on that matter. I have a little bit of a spoiler. So I've been playing with an agent that is based on a critical thinking intervention that I developed with Bob Simonovich at the University of Derby, that we have been doing for a few years now. So I created an agent and trained the agent in the materials from our intervention. And I've been testing it as a potential to give formative feedback on coursework writing. And this is an example of feedback that I received from the agent when I pasted a paragraph from one of my manuscripts. So it talks about the engagement with academic discourse, evidence-based arguments, and then it gives 5 categories of things that I could revise in that paragraph. And an example like challenge assumptions, and then the ideas that it gives me to challenge my assumptions are very much based on that paragraph that I pasted and are quite interesting. And the other categories were evaluate evidence, consider broader implications, engage multiple perspectives, and one very important one, in my opinion, strengthen authorial voice, which is, as students use AI more and more, we want them to still feel that they have that authorial voice. And this was part of one of the publications that we had, and we trained the model using that study as well. So this is quite promising, I feel. It gives very interesting feedback. Obviously, we wouldn't expect a student to go and change everything in one paragraph, but it's giving them the tools to think about, is the message that I need to send in this piece of writing clear enough? Where are the gaps, and what are the things that I could be considering? And it breaks down in a very nice and applied way to students. So yeah, that's all I had, and I would be happy to have a chat if you have any experiences to share or if you have any questions.
Thank you. At this point, because we've got about 15 minutes for questions, I'm going to just, if we're okay with, Katia, do you want to continue the recording, or we could stop the recording and then we can open it up for a 15-minute conversation without the slides?
Yeah, I think we
and
can. Yeah, but let's stop the recording and then we
yeah,
might
we
feel more
can.
free for conversations.
Yes, thank you. Right.